Welcome back to Interview with Mike Billiot. We're talking today with State Representative Damon Baldone. Now, you just came back from the legislative session for the state of Louisiana. You've been in the legislature for 10 years, and obviously you've been to numerous legislative sessions. The last one just ended on Monday. When did this legislative session begin?
Session began the last weekend of April.
Okay, and so it's several months long, and I assume that you spend most of your time in Baton Rouge, and that most of your time is spent in session when.
Yeah, generally during session you're in Baton Rouge. I usually go to the Sunday night and work till Thursday night or Friday morning. I'm able to come back to my district office generally on Friday, get some work done. You know, talking to constituents, find out what's going on, and then just doing personal work, and then going back to Baton Rouge on Sundays. Sometimes we do work the weekends. This last weekend we worked Friday night till 10 o'clock. We worked on Father's Day from 3 o'clock till 10 o'clock. So sometimes we do work hard on the weekends.
I want to talk about how the British Petroleum oil spill affected that legislative session, but obviously there were several months that took place in the legislative session that before the British Petroleum oil spill occurred. What are some of those highlights of this year's legislative session?
Well, the biggest thing, I guess, was the budget. Obviously, everybody knows we have a shortfall because of the economic downturn. We had to reduce the budget. Governor Jindal did not want to. He proposed the budget. The governor proposed the budget, and it comes to us, and then we tweak it. Governor Jindal said that he didn't want any new taxes, so we had to just make cuts. This year is a non-fiscal year, which means we are unable to raise taxes. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't do it unless a special session was called by the governor or the legislature. So we have to make cuts. Next year will be a fiscal session. That's a session that taxes can be raised. So the years alternate, where it's a non-fiscal and a fiscal year. So this year, since we didn't have the opportunity to raise taxes, we had no choice but to cut. We passed about a $26 billion budget, which was down from about 28, 29, maybe almost 28 billion dollars. So there's a huge cut in state services this year. And that was probably the most difficult challenge of this time. And I ended up voting against the budget because I think we made cuts that are too severe to our charity hospital system, as well as higher education, Nichols being one of them. I think it's going to make the cuts next year even harder because we're not investing in our community. If you don't have an educated workforce, you don't have a healthy workforce, it costs you more money down the road.
Now let's talk about that just a little bit. There's been some talk with regard to Nichols State University, your alma mater, that it would, number one, perhaps close, number two, perhaps become a community college, or number three, definitely not offer as many programs as it has traditionally offered. How true are those three things?
It's always a possibility that they can close Nichols. I don't think it will happen. It's not going to happen while I'm there, I promise you that. They I think, issued that statement as a scare tactic. At one point during the session, they said, well, that's a possibility where we close some universities, and Nichols could possibly be one of them. I don't think that will ever happen. The reason being is because there's too much will on the legislature to support the local colleges, four-year colleges. I'm a prime product of that. Had it not been for Nichols, I'm not sure if I could have afforded to go to LSU. and I see the benefit of it, and it creates wealth in that community. And again, I don't see that ever happening, no matter how bad the budget gets. I think the outcry from our communities, ourselves, Southeastern, Northwestern, UL, Tech, we all want to support our local colleges, and we see the benefit for it. So I don't think it will ever close.
Now, you're going through the legislative session. You have a lot on your plate. You have a lot to accomplish. At some point, the British Petroleum oil spill occurs. How does that affect the process of the legislative session for 2010?
It was funny because it hit us at a funny time. Session started the last weekend of April, and actually the deadline for filing bills is several weeks before then. So the deadline for filing legislation happened before the oil spill. And you're still able to file a couple bills, but when session first started, and before the deadline happened, we didn't know how bad the situation was going to be. We didn't know could have been shut off in one day. We didn't know at that time, and it was really too late for us to file much legislation. We were able to you are able to amend bills, and there were several bills that were amended and several bills that were filed in time to address the British Petroleum Oil spill. Most of it is a federal response because it happened in federal waters. But the biggest piece of legislation that we had actually failed regarding British Petroleum. This is the worst controversy I've ever seen in my 10 years of service. The Senate passed a contingency fee bill for attorneys. For you viewers out there, it's where attorneys work and get a portion of the proceeds that they're able to collect from the lawsuit. Being in complete dire straits right now, the state, we are unable to hire attorneys on a contingency fee because our law states that we are unable to hire lawyers on a contingency fee. We are the only Gulf Coast state without that legislation. And we don't have the money to hire attorneys. Our Attorney General, Buddy Caldwell, estimates maybe a low of $20 million to $100 million worth of attorney's fees to fight BP to collect our damages. We will have, I'm sure, several $billion worth of damages to our Gulf Coast and our fisheries and our wildlife.
So you're saying that right now the state doesn't have the legal authority to hire attorneys who can wait on their fees until they collect. Rather, you have to pay them up front for what they're doing.
Absolutely. Again, we're the only Gulf Coast state to do that, which is ludicrous. I mean, we're going to lose out hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, because we can't afford lawyers. We can't afford to go fight BP. The other states will. It's ridiculous. Big business fought this legislation because they're scared. They don't like trial lawyers. I'm a trial lawyer, but I'm a business owner. I probably earn about 95% of my income as a business owner, not as an attorney. And it's hard for I guess the perception out there that trial lawyers are bad guys, and I disagree. I fight for my profession every day. We fight for the people. We fight for what's right. The only thing I can get in court is what's due to that person. Can't get any more. And so we need that tool to fight BP. However, the Senate passed a contingency fee bill. However, it got killed in the House. The House didn't have it heard in time, I think deliberately, and therefore we don't have that tool to fight BP. And it's sad. Louisiana is the loser.